As we're looking at some of the initial results here, it looks like the vast majority of you are doing it with your internal staff, which is great. I will say, and we've kind of talked about the evolution of the managed services business within an MSP, but one of the things you're probably going to find is that in the very beginning, you've got customers with Windows servers, and it's kind of a fairly standard environment, and so you can have a couple of generalists and do fairly well. And then as you start to grow your business, you might start to get a few applications that are a little bit outside the norm. You might start to run into some network infrastructure or other infrastructure that's a little bit outside the norm. And then you start having to make decisions. I mean, there might be databases in the mix as well. You have to start deciding, am I going to hire this next guy who's an expert in Microsoft SQL Server, or am I going to find a way to still take that customer and deliver service around some of the applications and infrastructure that they have in a way that's going to be profitable for my business. And so a lot of customers that we have are using us because they do have internal staff, but rather than try to hire experts in every domain where they need expertise, it just becomes much more cost effective for them to at least partially hand off some of the work that needs to be done. And it may be just the triaging and escalation of alerts and providing off-hours coverage. It may be full-blown remediation and troubleshooting of other segmented parts of their tasks that they have to perform, and it could be database, it could be virtualization expertise, it could be any number of things. But it's really interesting as you start to think about your business and how you go about figuring out how you're going to deliver all this service, and whether it's going to be hiring more people or partly leveraging a supplier like us. So I'd like to go ahead. What I'm going to do right now is kind of run through the watch and manage services so you guys can get a very detailed view of exactly what we're talking about with these different services that we're talking about. So Server Watch is all about providing monitoring on a server, and we have a whole bunch of monitors that we install for various things that we want to be paying attention to. Obviously, availability is clearly one of those things. So is the server alive? But probably more importantly in a lot of cases is really performance. And I know a lot of you have probably been frustrated in the past with the server saying, yes, I'm awake, I respond to a ping request, but the performance of the applications is not what it needs to be. And so that's where really the rubber meets the road on a lot of this monitoring service, is trying to get a visibility and understanding for why isn't the thing performing, what's going on in that server that's causing it to degrade. And so we have a lot of different monitors that we set up to be able to identify areas within the server that might be causing problems that are relative to performance. We also do a lot of work around looking at event logs and being able to assess the content of event logs and make meaningful decisions about that is very important when you're trying to figure out what's wrong, and similar for websites. As I mentioned, we definitely escalate these alerts on the watch service. So that's going to be working with your team to say, who do they go to? Is it different for different hours of the day? Is it different for different kinds of alerts? Where do you want them to go? Clearly, we provide patch management. We will, by default, work with you to set up a patch schedule, because many of your customers might have certain windows where they want the patches applied. So we'll be able to determine when you want these patches applied, and is it only the security patches, or is it going to be other kinds of patches as well? So we'll be able to figure that out with you how you want it. By default, we definitely apply the security and critical patches, and then if there's other non-critical patches, then we'll work with you to determine if and when you want those applied, and we'll do that under the patching schedule. And then we definitely manage the antivirus platform and also backups. And again, when I say manage backups, we're really managing the successful completion of a backup, and if it didn't back up correctly, then we'll be escalating and notifying you. Now compare all of this to the managed service. So, a lot of the same kinds of things you're seeing around monitoring and around patch management, antivirus. The big difference is that second column down there, the second bullet, which is troubleshooting and resolution. And what we're doing there is when we see a problem, we're going to log into that server. We're going to start to go down the path of using the various best practices that we have in terms of identifying what is the cause of this problem, and can we troubleshoot it and fix it and resolve it. And really the only time that we're not going to be able to resolve a problem is if the environment has become dead and the server is unable to be communicated to. It could be a hard drive failure or some kind of a power supply failure. If it's something like that, obviously we're ultimately going to have to escalate to you, and you'll go on site and physically replace or repair that machine from a hardware perspective. But luckily, the vast majority of issues are software problems, and they're things that we can identify and resolve remotely, and that's what we'll be doing on the managed service for servers. Next, let's take a look at network devices. So the watch service for network devices, and I do want to make kind of a little explanatory statement about network devices because they vary greatly, and a very simple switch really won't even have the managed service associated with it because there's nothing to manage on a real simple switch. But as you get into more complex types of network devices such as firewalls or routers, then these devices can be managed. And so you'll see the difference between watch and manage, and just note that some network devices really can't even be managed, but we can still determine whether they're up or not and be able to monitor what's going on. So basically we're going to be able to monitor, is this device alive? Is it performing again the way it needs to be doing? And if it isn't, then we're going to triage that alert, make sure it's real, and then we'll be able to escalate to your team as appropriate. As opposed to the manage service, which in addition to all the monitoring and alerting that we're doing, and we're also going to now troubleshoot and fix these devices if they are a manageable device. And so we'll log in there, we'll look at the I/O configurations, we'll be able to do whatever's necessary to be able to repair that device to working order. And we will be backing up the network configuration so that if something catastrophic happens, we're going to be able to do that and restore that device back to the way it was with coordination of your team. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Windows. And I think Windows is an interesting platform for a couple of reasons. One, some people just want to have Windows maintenance only. So we do not monitor desktops in the same sense that we monitor servers or network devices, because they get turned off and on and they get taken off the network and they're on the internet, off the internet. So we don't monitor desktops, but what we do is provide a whole suite of preventative maintenance activities around desktops that allow us to make sure that this machine is in its best proper working order. And that will be updating the antivirus platform, making sure the environment is patched, and paying attention to a variety of things that can cause degradations of performance. If we see things that are kicking off red flags for us, it's not a real-time monitoring, but it will still be periodic maintenance that we're providing. We'll be able to escalate that to your team, and you'll probably hear from these people, hey, my desktop takes forever to boot, it's not performing, it seems very sluggish, and these are the kinds of things that you can go in and fix, and we'll be able to give you a lot of detail around how to go in and fix in terms of what the problem is with it. This service is not the same as Helpdesk. Helpdesk is this ability, as we talked about in the beginning, for somebody to ring the phone up and just call in and say, hey, I need help, and they'll get a North American voice that's going to go over and solve their problems. So this service really is very synergistic with the Helpdesk service, because if you have a well-maintained system, they probably won't need to make so many calls into the Helpdesk, but invariably they may get attacked by a virus, or they may do any number of crazy things that end users do on their machines. And by the way, on the Helpdesk, it may not just be their desktop PC. It could be a tablet, it could be their smartphone. We support a whole wide variety of different types of devices. So any issues that people are having with these kinds of things, including even things like installing applications and that type of thing, are all services that we can provide on the Helpdesk service. So let's talk for a minute about integration. So as I mentioned, I know a lot of you guys are focused on Kaseya and ConnectWise, and that's great. The more kind of standardization you can have, the better. But I just want to be clear that if you are using other RMM platforms or other PSA tools, we absolutely provide connectivity with those. I've listed the primary ones that we support on this slide, but there could be other ones that we can talk about. These are the most mainstream ones that we work with every day. And if for whatever reason you do not have a PSA tool and you don't have any internal ticketing system, we have our own ticketing system, and we'll provide you access to that, because I just want to make it clear, everything that we work on, whether it's a Helpdesk incident or some type of an alert, an issue that's coming off the network or a server, we create a ticket for that, and we track everything by tickets, and that's how we determine when the problem came to us, what we've done along the process to fix it, when it was resolved, and provide a complete soup to nuts documented history of exactly who worked on what, when, what did they do, and how did we fix the problems. And a lot of that is what ultimately bakes into our knowledge base, so that we have this complete environment of best practice on how to solve any problem that we ever see. And as you can imagine, we're dealing with thousands and thousands of problems every week, and that allows us to get great visibility into what goes wrong, how to fix it most rapidly, and kind of just gives us this knowledge base that becomes a very core part of the value that we add to our client base. So that's just a little bit about integration. In terms of workflow, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a feel for how it is to work with us, kind of how do alerts and tickets and things manage through the system. So first of all, as I mentioned before, I don't know if I use this word, but the concept of a closed loop methodology, really what we're doing here is making sure that if we get an alert, we're going to notify you, hey, we see this problem, we're working on it. Every time we do something that we're going to improve a situation or provide some fix to the environment, we're going to communicate with you. And we're not just going to communicate with you when we think we're done. We're going to make sure that you agree that the problem is fixed. And only then do we actually close out the ticket. So we're not going to tell you, hey, we fixed it, it's closed. We're going to have you say, yes, I agree, it's fixed, thank you, this is a closed incident. And that's the only time when we consider something closed, is when you agree with it. I talked a little bit about third-party, but I do want to say that typically there are a number of third-party vendors that are involved in your customer accounts. And it could be through hardware that you sold, it could be internet connectivity, but we definitely will provide incident management for third parties for things where there are vendor coordination required. So that can come in handy for you, especially if you don't want to wait on hold with some of these guys. That's the kind of thing that we'll do, and our NOC is able to deliver that. And then in terms of client notification, there are different ways that people want to communicate. So if it happens to be through the ticketing system, if you want a direct email, if you need to be communicated in different ways at different times, depending on the time of day and those kinds of things, all of that is stuff that we can configure and set up during the onboarding process, and we have tremendous flexibility in supporting the way that you want to hear communication. So that's something that we kind of pride ourselves on, is being very flexible and really working the way you want us to work. And then I think, when we talk about the managed services, this ability to just have tremendous levels of expertise at our disposal, where we can rally the troops and be able to put a Tiger team and a SWAT team on situations and get problems fixed rapidly, is just an economy of scale that's difficult for smaller MSPs to match. And so I think that is a tremendous value that we add, is our ability to do that. And then I've talked about the documentation process in the ticketing environment, and that's just kind of a reiteration of that. And then even if you have some custom procedures that you need us to follow in terms of escalation, that's very much the mainstream of what we do. And if it's different people at different times or different engineers based on the different kinds of incidents that are coming up from the environment, we believe that the onboarding process is all about understanding how you want to hear from us, how things should be escalated, what those procedures are, and accommodating as much of your way of doing business as we possibly can. So let's talk a little bit about the supported platforms now. Hopefully you're not going to see any real huge surprises here. I mean, the mainstream server operating system that we see out there is Windows. So we provide basically any Windows server environment that's out there, we support. And from a desktop perspective, it's going to be XP, Vista, Windows 7. We definitely support Mac. So you're going to find that's an ever-increasing environment. And from a server perspective, by the way, we also support Linux. I don't know how much that's a part of your customer base, but if you have customers running some Linux servers, we certainly have expertise there. And then probably the fastest, highest exploding part of our market is the whole mobile environment, whether it be tablets or smartphones. And so there you can see kind of a list of different smartphones ranging from Android to the Apple platforms to Windows Mobile. We really support the mobile devices, and we see this as an ever-increasing component of the service that we deliver. And one other thing I'll mention along those lines is I know a lot of you are starting to sell things like Microsoft 365 and other web-based, cloud-based applications, and we also support that. So if you want to sell some of these cloud-based platforms and you are a little bit leery about your own level of expertise in these areas, this is a great way to sell platforms with a support contract where people can call up and we'll be able to help them with any aspect of these cloud-based applications. So that's another thing I just want to mention there. And of course on the antivirus side, there's a number of different platforms that we support, and you'll see these are all kind of the mainstream AV platforms. Before I close up, I just wanted to mention a little bit about pricing. So this is the price that you would pay per device for the services that we've been talking about today. So on a server, if we're providing the watch service, which is kind of the preventative maintenance and escalation, it's going to be $10 a server. If it's a fully managed server, you're going to be able to you're going to pay $40 a server for that. Network devices, it's $9 and $29. And the way I broke out desktop was for preventative maintenance on desktop, which we want to call the watch service, it's $4. But if you want full-blown help desk, it's $16. So if you want both of those together, it's going to be $20. That's an additive price there. But you can buy either one by itself, and you don't have to have the other. But I will tell you that the help desk will become quieter if you have the desktop preventative maintenance service because of the reasons that we talked about. So these are all monthly recurring prices. And just to throw some numbers out there, most of our clients that purchase something like a managed server from us are charging somewhere between $75 to say $150 a month for that service. So there's a tremendous amount of margin that you can make on this, and a lot of it has to do with what you build into the service. So for the guys that charge $150 a month, many of them may include unlimited on-site visits as well, which luckily, because they now have a very full-featured service on the server that's preventative maintenance, it's remote troubleshooting and remediation, they don't have to go out now every time, so the actual site visit becomes something that's more related to a hardware failure. But they throw that kind of thing in there to give this customer the warm and fuzzy that says no matter what's wrong, I'm either going to proactively fix it or I'll come out to your site and fix it, whatever needs to be done. It's a fully managed device now. And so I'm just trying to give you a flavor for some of the margins that you can expect to make on this. But this is a very margin-rich opportunity for MSPs, particularly around the NOC and the help desk service both. So here's some contact information. That kind of brings us to the end of our formal presentation on this thing. I'd like to open it up now for questions. I know we've been getting a ton of questions in the Q&A box, so what we'll do is pick out some of the most commonly asked ones and go ahead and bring those up just live in the forum. I think just to ask either Chris or Dan or Trevor, do any of you guys have any other comments that you want to add about this or any questions that you guys want to bring up at this point?
I just wanted to highlight real quick, talking about the proactive thing. I talked to a lot of partners about Helpdesk, and they would always call us, and that, I'd always get the question, they would say, well, what is the Helpdesk going to do for me? They would always ask that, where you could tell just by the inflection of their voice, it's like they're waiting for the Helpdesk to, sign onto their customers' machines and do all the patching and do all of that work, and it was good to hear that you guys are making a shift from just being reactive to being proactive. And it's also good that you have this division where, it's very clear that there's a help desk service and there's a NOC service, so that there's no real confusion, So I think that that's really good. The other thing you mentioned, there was a question in here talking about Rmm Tools. I know that you guys work with almost every Rmm tool out there, or most of the major ones. But I did also want to mention that, obviously at Virtual Administrator we specialize in helping people get started with that. So if you don't have an Rmm tool yet, or you're looking at them, or you're looking to make a shift, that's obviously our cup of tea. So we can definitely help you with that. So, yep.
I wanted to comment too. I think you brought up a really important point, which is this kind of reactive versus proactive type support. And I think one of the reasons why we were so confident to move into the NOC business is because we've done the hard yards of understanding what it means to pick up a phone and be able to help a customer in a reactive mode where something has happened and they've gotten attacked by a virus or they can't connect or whatever, and we have to get on that phone and fix that problem. And I think the reputation that we've built over the past few years has been based on just very high level of expertise around being able to fix people's problems quickly. And so we knew that we had this kind of problem-solving DNA and really strong communication skills. And as we talked to a lot of customers, they said, the thing we hate about the NOC services that are out there, we'd love to partner with a NOC provider, but the problem is it's communication issues. We just don't feel like we get the level of service. And, we kind of feel like they're always trying to squeeze a little bit more margin out of us by just giving us resources that aren't really up to the task. And so we felt as we added NOC services to our portfolio, what we wanted to do was bring in the same level of kind of tenacious commitment to solving problems that we've already developed on the help desk side, and also the strength in communication. So I think one of the biggest things you're going to see from the live virtual help desk NOC side is a level of communication that you're probably not used to from a typical shared NOC. And that's something that we're going to pride ourselves on, and we're going to be able to really continue this level of communication expertise that people come to rely on us for, and so I encourage you to hold us to task on that and make sure that you're seeing that clear level of communication that comes from a North American-based business.